Okay, can you hear me? Talking about bereavement is something I've done a bunch in my life. Today I have a kind of a new focus on it, though, because of a quote that Tracy Wilkinson spoke in her talk several weeks ago. It was by Christina Pilchowski, who is from the University of Washington in St. Louis. She's a palliative care physician. And she gave a definition to spirituality that I listened to it first, and then when I got home, I had realized that I had to contact Tracy and get a copy of it and think about it a little more. I'm going to read it again, and then we can put that aside for a minute, and we'll go from there. The aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to the self, to others, to nature, and to the significant or sacred. If you can't hold on to that, it's kind of interwoven with my talking of bereavement. My work as coordinator for the bereavement programs. First, I was an intern in my graduate studies at the University of Nebraska. I began a bereavement program for the Methodist Hospital Hospice in Omaha. Montana did not have, I'm from Montana, but I was born in Omaha. Montana does not have a graduate school of social works. So I went back to Omaha because I got residency there. I also lived with my sister, which is another whole story. I'll try not to go into that. Anyway, this internship helped me. I had also gone back to visit in Billings and had spoken with the director of our hospice, the Big Sky Hospice there, and had indicated that I was very interested in becoming the bereavement coordinator for Big Sky Hospice. They had a part-time one, they were moving up to a full-time one, and it just worked. So I knew that I was going to have an influence in my studies for hospice. I did take a semester of the history of hospice, and when I began in Billings, I got back and 8 months after I started, I began in September, and in April my oldest son died. And so I began having to practice what I preach. And I wasn't sure I was going to be able to, but it worked out. And it goes back to there we are with the spirituality, the connectedness with the moment, with myself, and with the others that I had contact with, and that got me through it, and it worked well. The bereavement was had a big jump in 1942 when there was a dreadful fire in Boston, the Coconut Grove Fire, where it was sort of an upper scale nightclub, and there were hundreds of students there celebrating a football game win, and they got caught in this dreadful fire, and almost 500 of them died. And Dr. Eric Lindemann, who was a psychiatrist at the Massachusetts General Hospital, began doing a study of speaking with the survivors, the people who had lost, mostly college students, and he made beginning great strides in understanding what what bereavement meant, what it was like to have that kind of loss in your life. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was from Switzerland, but did most of her graduate work here and postgraduate work in Chicago, was also very instrumental in when she came up with her 5 stages of dying and bereavement. Interestingly enough, she started out as the 5 stages were for the terminally ill patient, but it morphed into for bereavement as well. And they have worked well. There are some containment in that to where from one stage to the next, where people were beginning to question whether it was a good thing to have such set steps, so in case you didn't finish one, you might not go on to the next kind of thing. Maybe you weren't doing it right. Anyway, it needed to be opened up just a little bit. One other interesting thing about this same time, Dame Cicely Saunders founded the first St. Christopher's Hospice in England. She had been a nurse and became a social worker and then a physician, and she was so appalled at the way terminally ill patients were treated that she began the hospice movement, and that is now worldwide. But it was interesting to me to realize that they were working at approximately the same time, kind of from the 1915 on up. My experience with bereavement at Big Sky Hospice in Billings, I began to rely on William Worden. He is a psychologist, and he was at Harvard, and he talked about not the 5 stages of bereavement, but the 5 tasks of bereavement. His theory is, he's still, well, actually he's in California now, but he's still alive. And his idea was not so much the stages as the various jobs. Believe me, bereavement is work, and the various jobs, the tasks that needed to be gone through, worked through, so that you can get to a comfortable place where the pain is reduced and you can go on and have a functioning life. I want to tell you about these 4. I'm not going to go into them. The 4 stages, not the stages, the tasks. I would just love to spend the rest of the time talking about them, but that's not basically what I really want to say. The 4 tasks are, the first one is to recognize that the person is gone, to accept the fact that they are no longer there, to accept the death. And that sounds easy because you know it's here, but it isn't here. And it takes a long time, where it will stop you right in the middle of your day, and you think, he's not here anymore, she's gone. That can be one of those things that goes on and then comes back and forth and kind of goes up and down. The second one is to face the pain of it, to recognize that the numbness that you're feeling at the beginning gives way to almost unendurable pain sometimes. The closeness of the relationship, there's a strong correlation there to the amount of bereavement, the amount of grief you will feel. So it is truly life-changing, and people will go to great lengths to try to deny it, try to avoid it, try to keep on working, working more than they had before, being distracted, not thinking about it at all. That's basically the kind of work that happens with the group works that I did in hospice. Groups are magnificent. They're almost magical, because there was a woman who was probably 65, 70, who had lost her husband. She had been a homemaker, and she was totally at home, did nothing about paying bills, or filling the car with gas, or changing the furnace filter, or any of those things. And her husband died in hospice, and she was totally unprepared for it. And one of my jobs was to contact people about their loss, to see if they were interested in coming to a group, or if they just wanted me to come by and speak with them. And she said that she didn't really know, but would I please send her what the agenda was for the next scheduled group, support group. And I did, and she came. It was during the day, and she came, and there were 6, 8 other people there. Everyone went around and talked about their loss, what they were going through. And by the time, one of the things that I really said, when they first came to the group, I said to them, I don't know how this is going to work for you, but I'd like to be sure that you come for at least 2 times. Because the first time is a shock and painful and scary. So please at least come 2 times. And she did. She came back. And then she came back again. And one of the things, fear was such a major thing for her. She had no idea how to cope. She had never reconciled a checkbook. She had, and the group kind of took her in and gave her ideas about who to contact about the bank for her reconciling of her checkbook. One man actually met her at a gas station and helped her fill her car with gas. Showed her how to do those things. And then there were hospice bereavement volunteers who had gone through my training, and they came to her house and sorted laundry, and she knew about sorting laundry. Although I did that for a man. I went down in his basement and sorted his laundry for him because he had no idea how to wash. It is that kind of thing that keeps them from being able to get by the grief and function again. Anyway, okay, back to the things, the pain. The third thing is to look at the role, to rethink the role that person played in your life, and to see if there is, it's almost like cleaning out a closet. You make a pile of the things that you want, the things that you don't need, and the things that you're going to give away. And that person's role in your life, is it something that you can do for yourself? Maybe it's not something that you don't need anymore. Maybe it's going to require getting some help from someone, from some outside person. Anyway, to really reevaluate what's going to have to happen for you to be able to have a functioning life. And the fourth task is getting to a point where you can think of the person who has gone, of your loss, without pain, where you have accepted the fact that they are gone, and that your world is changed forever. But that having worked through all these other things, you're going to make it. It's okay. It's what Steve was talking about here this morning. There is hope. I could give you so many examples of people. One particularly interesting one was a man, middle-aged, who came to the groups. He came 8 times. He sat off to the side. He never said a word, never got involved in the conversations. The group magic wasn't working with him. We didn't think. He sat back and listened, but he came every time, and he didn't even say hello or goodbye. He just came and left. And when the 8 weeks, I think it was an 8-week program then, he stood up at the end and thanked everybody that they had helped him so tremendously for sharing their pain with him. And the point there, of course, is that everybody grieves so differently. There is absolutely no right or wrong, unless it is doing harm to you or to someone else. That's the first one I've ever heard that never talked about it. Who knows? Maybe he went home and, I don't know, beat his head on the wall. I don't know. But he got what he needed out of the group. The group is an amazing dynamic because it includes you with people who are going through similar circumstances than yourself. I did very little other than to start the going around and the sharing. And then my job was to listen very carefully and see if there were some red flags that came up. That's grief support. Grief therapy, grief counseling. Grief therapy is if there are other problems, maybe a mental illness or a mental health problem that the person has brought into the bereavement after the loss, or if they simply, maybe they've had too many losses before that they never fully worked through. And when this one came, it just knocked their socks off. Unexpectedly. They had not realized that they had not worked through the others. I had a man who came, he called on the phone. He was not a hospice patient survivor. He had heard about the grief groups, and he called me and asked if he could just come in and talk to me. He had lost his mother 12 years before. I think he might have been in his late 30s or early 40s. And he said, frankly, she had died in October, the end of October. He said he was tired of having Thanksgiving and Christmas be just miserable. And what was going on? Could I give him some help there? Well, yeah, he had never done any work at all. He had avoided or denied his mother's death. It was simply too painful for him to look at. And so we just for 2 or 3, 4 weeks, we just kind of, he just talked and talked and talked about that. And he got better. It is almost magic, and this is where the spirituality part comes in. That part that we set aside. It's almost self-evident that it is the connectedness to seeking the meaning and the purpose of the experience of their connectedness to the moment. I love that one because that makes you stop the moment. How are we connected to the moment? It makes you stop and just think right there. I mean, right here we are. Are we connected? And then to yourself, and then to others, and then to nature or the natural. Dying is very natural. It's very much part of what life, living is. And then the significant or the sacred. And all of those things were brought out in these groups or with individuals as well. The connectedness, either between me and them, the group and them, the group among themselves. It's big stuff, and I don't even really know how to talk about it as far as being allowed into probably the most intimate relationships with a person whom I had not known 8 weeks ago. And under the aegis of hospice, there was a trust there and a confidence that sometimes just stunned me. You know, an honor, a privilege. I don't begin to say it, but it's all built in there. Anyway, let me just look and see if I've said everything I wanted to say about that. I think of other ways people showed their grief, how they expressed it. There was a young woman who had lost her father, and what she did, and she said with tears streaming down her face in the group, what helped her the most was to go to the closet where his winter coat was hanging and hug his winter coat and smell him in his winter coat, and just hold on to it. And yes, it was painful, but it was so wonderful to have him, the smell of him there. The woman who finally, I forgot, who learned how to put gas in her car and reconcile her checkbook. When she came back the final time of our group, she was just glowing, and we said, what's happened? What's going on? She said, well, she said, for years I have wanted to take a painting course, and my husband didn't want me to be gone at night, and so I didn't go, and I am signed up for the painting course. And she was just glowing over it. She was so pleased with herself. Pretty much that's the message that I was interested in passing on to you. I would doubt that there's anybody here that hasn't had serious losses. You know, we all have them every day, and we kind of discount them. Loss is the same thing, not the same thing, but it produces a huge change. And every time there's a change, there's an adjustment. And the adjustment is grief. I mean, that's what makes the adjustment. And I have the feeling that in our lives, if we paid more attention to the losses that happen to us every day, and gave them some credence and grieved them, that we might not get so much baggage pulling along with us as we mature. Certainly with losing someone very close to you. Anyway, does anyone want to say anything or have any questions? Yes, Jesse.